Welcome to the Faculty Pride podcast, brought to you by the Southeastern Louisiana University Center for Faculty Excellence. The center's mission is to facilitate the professional development of faculty in their pursuit of excellence in teaching, research, and service. To help us accomplish that mission, this podcast provides insight on teaching and technology from the faculty perspective. Welcome to the first ever episode of the Faculty Pride podcast, brought to you by the Center for Faculty Excellence. My name is Jared Wall, and I am the College Technology and Media Coordinator at the Center. For our first episode, we're going to briefly discuss the purpose of the Center and this new podcast, along with the major changes that have come to higher education as a result of recent events. And finally, we will discuss best teaching practices and educational technology with Dr. June Williams. Our purpose at the Center for Faculty Excellence, as you probably heard in the opening to the show, is to facilitate the professional development of faculty in their pursuit of excellence in teaching, research, and service. With that in mind, the Center for Faculty Excellence offers resources and professional development that support faculty in these areas. We do have a fully functioning lab for faculty in Mims Hall. We also have a team that works together to support faculty in training and professional development at the Center. Joining me today for this inaugural episode of the podcast and is Dr. Williams. Before I introduce you, let me remind myself here that the reason that we decided to start this podcast was to bring some more resources from a faculty perspective to other members of faculty at Southeastern so that you can hear from other teaching faculty members the technology and best teaching practices that they are using in their classrooms as they teach, and maybe get some ideas and support for you, other faculty members, to use in your teaching and as you develop your courses as well. So joining me today is Dr. Williams. She is Associate Professor and a Program Coordinator in the Department of Health and Human Sciences. She has been at Southeastern for 25 years, 20 of those as a full-time faculty member. I have briefly described your role, but take a moment to introduce yourself to faculty who may not know who you are, what you teach, or what your research interests are.
Hey, good morning, Jared. Thanks for having me. I'm a faculty member in the counseling program. We're a graduate program that we have concentrations in school counseling, clinical mental health counseling, and marriage, couple, and family counseling. It's a 60-hour master's program. And we have 5 other faculty members or actually 4, just hired a new one, but we'll be having 6 in our program. And that's what I do on a regular basis.
Awesome. So I'm going to start this, now that people know who you are. As our first episode, we're actually in historic times. And so at this moment, the entire world has been undergoing a pandemic that is changing life as people know it. Among those changes are social distancing. We've been ordered to close all non-essential businesses, and one of those businesses that is changing is higher education. Higher ed has felt the impact of these unprecedented times. So could you take a moment as a faculty member to discuss how these changes have impacted our institution and any advice you have for faculty members during this time period?
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question. I think when, we keep hearing the term social distancing. And one of the things that I've heard other people say is that it's not necessarily social distancing that we want to do, but it's physical distancing. And so I think one of the things that I've been mindful of, and I think part of this is my counseling background as well as my teaching background, is to find ways to connect with the students, because I think that's one of the first things that hit everybody was the abrupt way that the semester sort of ended the way we knew it and then reassumed in a new virtual way that we weren't prepared for. And I've had a background in teaching online. I've taught several 100% online classes. I've taught several hybrid classes, but what I quickly realized is that the courses that I regularly teach are experiential face-to-face classes that I had never, ever conceptualized as how do I do that in an online environment. And so I think for many people, even those who have experience teaching online, if you didn't begin the semester thinking and conceptualizing the course as an online course, that's an abrupt shift to be able to do that mid-semester at the same time that you're continuing the class as it is. And that, I think, for many people has been the greatest challenge, that and trying to find ways to connect with the students.
Yes, I've read a lot about the connection with the students being important and the least disruption you can have, especially on a face-to-face class that has now gone to remote, which is what's required to continue the semester right now. And so I think one of the questions that other faculty members may be interested in is, what would you say are the differences between teaching face-to-face and teaching remotely? And again, we'll be nuanced with this question. At the center, we've been very careful to say that moving a face-to-face course to remote teaching is not the same thing as designing a fully online course, because we know there's a lot more that goes into when you know ahead of time that you're teaching fully online. There are a lot of things you consider. But what do you think the challenge is from going from face-to-face to that remote teaching?
I think the greatest challenge, at least that I faced, was trying to figure out a way to let the students know that I was there in the same way and to get that across. I think most people listen differently than they read. I think, we talk a lot, I hear faculty in various disciplines talk about the fact that students don't read. You send them an email, you send them directions, and then they send you an email asking something that was clearly identified in the email. And I think that's pretty typical of the generation of students that most of us are teaching right now. And that's a challenge, because trying to find ways to get the information out there and sort of kind of repeat it and put it in different places so that they can see it. How do I emphasize it? As well as thinking through, how do I connect with them during that class time? So those are some of the things that I've kind of thought about a little bit.
And as I listen to you talk and know that you have the counseling expertise, what's the difference between a social connection between a face-to-face class versus what a lot of people are doing now, which is the virtual meetings online? Is there a major difference between, as far as the connection that actually happens in the virtual space versus in a classroom?
I think it's different. I think we can find ways to make it as good as we can do with that forum. One of the things, I may be jumping ahead with one of your questions you might ask me later, but we have smaller classes. So the classes that I teach are anywhere from 8 to probably about 12. And so it was important for me in those experiential classes to find ways that we could come face to face using, at first, Google Meet, and then went to using Zoom, because with Zoom you can see everybody at once, and that makes a big difference in those classes. I also recognize that when you have larger classes, it's impossible, and not all classes are built for the same degree of interaction that ours are. At least the classes that I teach are very interactive. I know other subjects and other areas are more content-based class, that are more lecture-based, but even those have some degree usually of student participation. And so if it's not using something where students are face-to-face like Google Meet or Zoom, then it may be trying to think about, how do I use the discussion forums to try to connect the students through those. And I think that when I first started teaching online, that was one of the ways that was really before kind of Google Meet and Zoom were really out there. It was like the only way that people could connect online in that forum. So that to me would be the best place to start in a lot of classes if you don't want to use the face-to-face modalities.
And I just, as in my limited time supporting faculty through this change, I think one of the things we've encouraged for remote teaching of face-to-face classes is to use that Google Meet as your standard class time to basically just, you could continue lecturing if you needed to. But I like that you're talking about the forums, and one of the things the center does is we support faculty in the learning management system that we have, which is Moodle, of course, and forums are a big part of that platform. I don't know that many faculty know this if they don't teach hybrid or online courses, but forums are a great way to keep students and faculty in touch with each other. It's not just important that the students see you, but it's important that students are actually interacting with each other and discussing the content that you're covering in your class at that time. So, is there any advice you can give faculty for the types of questions you ask in forums that get the most responses from your students? Because I know sometimes you just ask a basic question like, so what's your thoughts on this? You may not get a whole lot back. So,
right. I think one of the things that I encourage staying away from in a forum is a question that has a specific right answer, because then if one person gives the right answer, then there's nothing else for the other people to share. You mentioned like what's your thoughts, what's your opinions on this. One of the things that I've found helpful is to ask, and of course it's a graduate level class, so it's a little bit different, but to ask students to bring their own resources to the class, maybe do a little research outside of class on something, share their personal experiences as it relates to what we're talking about. And the other thing is to maybe give some scenarios or sort of a case study, if you will, that people can interact with and talk about from a variety of different perspectives on that. So
excellent points.
I was going to add too, one of the things that I was thinking as you were talking a little bit about using that as a forum and using Google Meet. You know, Google Meet doesn't just have to be, yes, I've been using that as like for class time and the class has been meeting in that, but the feature of being able to record in that and being able to upload that, say, to YouTube so that they have easy access to that is a really neat way that people can like put a lecture online and not a long lecture, maybe a 5-minute mini lecture or something. Because one of the things that like in best practices of online education is that the students want to see you. And I think the other piece of that too is that students can do the same thing. Students, you know, we think, well, we're online, they can't do the presentations that they normally would do in class if you have presentations. But yes, they could do that. They could post their link, and there's a lot of opportunities to do things like that would allow them to see each other. I've also used video introductions before, where people do a short video and interact with each other within the discussion forum. If it's a large class, you can divide the discussion forum into smaller groups. So there's a lot of options out there, I think, to get people connected on a variety of different levels.
Excellent information. And just to piggyback on what you're saying about the video length, research has shown that after 5 minutes, people tend to stop listening. That may be something for face-to-face faculty to consider in lecture classrooms as well, that it's good to break things up so that the attention span can be there when you're actually covering that important content. But especially with videos, even if you have a lecture that's 50 minutes, you can break that up into multiple videos and parts, and students can watch those over a couple of days rather than to have to sit through 50 minutes at one time, especially with everything that's going on and watching it. When you're not in a classroom, it requires a lot of self-discipline to continue your learning as opposed to being there and, you know, having the professor in front of you. So I think you make some good points there. Yeah. Just to you got something else? Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think one of the differences, because you asked about the differences, if you're not seeing everyone in a classroom, usually you can see everyone, and for the most part, you can see if they're engaged, they're paying attention or not. The problem online, if you don't see them, you don't know. You may know, did they open up a document or did they open a video? But beyond that, you often don't know, what did they do with that? And so one of the things, kind of connecting this to the discussion forum, is that you can create some questions that are based on what you're asking them to watch or on the lectures that you use. and have them interact about that, where they really need to have watched that in order to have that discussion or include that on test material and that sort of thing. This is sort of a check, because I think that's one of the things that people worry about online.
And I think that's a fantastic way. It's a way of holding them accountable, but also having them synthesize and use that information. So you're not just saying watch the video, but let's use what we learned. So it's kind of it gives you the accountability piece, and it gives them a reason to use the information they're learning, which I think is fantastic when you're talking about student learning. Just to finish off that topic, and now we can move from the current situation, just in teaching in general. Any other technology tools that you're using that you think other faculty members should know about?
Oh, God, there are so many, Jared. I think one of the ones that I had fun with and actually had done a little presentation at the center on was Kahoot.
Yes.
Is a way of, and it's very, very simple to use. And if somebody's not familiar with it, you could actually just Google Kahoot.com and find out. But it's sort of a gamey type of interaction that helps people. It serves as both a formative and a summative check sometimes, if you can develop those well. And I have to be honest, in this new environment, I haven't thought through yet how I might be able to incorporate that online. That's something I'm probably going to spend some time this weekend thinking about, but I'm sure other people are thinking about it. And so I think one of the things that I'm learning is that I don't have to recreate the wheel. There's people out there doing things that I probably would never have thought about. So trying to find out those things, researching those things are very helpful.
That's why we're doing this podcast. So hopefully other people will learn about some of these things from you. And Kahoot that you mentioned, when I describe it to people, it reminds me of if you go out to eat somewhere that has the little trivia games where you can play from your table. Yes. Kahoot is kind of like that. It puts the question up, and then the students answer, and the faster you answer, the more points you get. And it has like a scoreboard after each round to see which student has the highest score, and it kind of makes them competitive while they're reviewing, and you're picking up that assessment piece for you. So when you're done, you can see which one of these questions did the student struggle with the most. Maybe I need to go reteach this or do a review on it. So I think it's a fantastic tool.
Yeah.
And it's engaging. I've watched classrooms and everybody's involved when you have a little fun and play a game for your review like that. So that's a fantastic one. Well, I'm going to ask you one last question as we finish up today. And that is, what would you say to someone who is apprehensive about using technology or who thinks that technology is too impersonal?
I would say don't be afraid of it. I think we're afraid of what we don't know sometimes. And I think about when I was trying to teach my mom how to use the computer when computers first came out. And my mom was very, very smart. She caught on very quickly. But it was so frustrating because she had this mental block in her head that she could not do this. She could not learn it. And she never did. And I think that would be my advice, is to just have an openness to it. There's so many resources. There's so many people that are willing to help. The center obviously has, very, very knowledgeable staff and people who can help do just about anything with technology and help people walk through things. It doesn't have to be anything major. I think you have to decide what level of technology that you're comfortable with and go with that. But probably everybody has colleagues that are doing it. I know in our field, we have different listservs and Facebook groups and, journals devoted to creativity and teaching and counseling. And so finding where those those articles and resources are and talking to other people about it and seeing what they're doing and asking questions about it. So
excellent points. Well, I am out of questions. Do you have anything you want to add before we wrap it up?
I can't think of anything, Jared. I think you've been very thorough in your questions. So
I think this is a great first episode, and there's a lot for people to take away from this in how and what the different, knowing the difference between online teaching and this remote teaching we're doing right now, that if they just use some of these tools we're talking about, they can bridge that gap between student communication while they can't see them face to face. And now they know there is a resource in the Center for Faculty Excellence that they can contact, and we can put them a list together of tools they can use and show them how to use them. But you are our first ever podcast guest, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time to let me ask you some questions and record your responses to it. And we appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Jared.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Faculty Pride Podcast. If you would like more information on the resources available to Southeastern faculty through the Center for Faculty Excellence, visit our website at southeastern.edu/admin/CFE. You can also stop by the center or utilize our lab by visiting us in Mims Hall. The link to the website and any resources discussed in this episode can be found in the notes section of the podcast.